Well, hello everyone, and welcome back to Adrian's Digital Basement. It's Wednesday, so it's time for another midweek mini mail call, and it's episode 36. 36. There are so many episodes, it blows my mind. And it's all due to the generosity of my viewers sending in all these amazing things, so thank you very much. Anyhow, without further ado, let's get right to it. Okay, we have a package here. This comes from Wolfgang, I'm trying to get my German pronunciation a bit better, Wolfgang, in Germany. Hello to all my German viewers. I think I've mentioned a bunch of times before that Germany is the #3 country, if I am correct. This is after the US as #1 and #2 of the UK. So it's pretty amazing, Germany being so high on the list, considering the native language is not English, and my channel is purely in English, except for my horrible German pronunciation. Of course, it goes without saying that Germany has a huge influence in the retro computer scene. To this day, there are so many projects coming out of Germany, current things for these old machines. And of course, with Commodore Germany, they were a huge influence on the company as a whole. Yes, Commodore was an American company, but like computers like the Amiga 2000 and lots of the direction of Commodore really came from the German division. Because the German division had a lot of different ideas about how Commodore should be run, and there were disagreements and things. Anyhow, okay, what is this here? This looks like a present here. It's in a box that says, "A life full of wonders is a wonderful life." Well, that's pretty nice. Is this going to be full of candy, or is it going to be full of retro goodies? Let's pop the lid. Ah, look, okay, we got a letter here. And we got all sorts of things. Okay, well, let's take a look at the letter first. Dear Adrian, I hope this finds you well and depending on the current flow of packages at a reasonable young age. Funny. Yeah, because I mean, it could take a while to open this. I think I got this, I can see on the packaging on the floor there, I got this on the 25th of November. So it's a little over a month since I've opened this. Now, when you'll see this video in a mail call package, that's a different story because I've already opened a good number of them ahead of Wolfgang's package here. So anyhow, he says, first of all, I am sorry, the CPM/pet stuff we emailed about didn't work out. Oh, that's right. I remember talking to Wolfgang about this. But in this package, you'll find some other stuff that might be useful or at very least entertaining. The C64 Mini doesn't post. I think it needs a fresh flash. All of the other stuff should work just fine. And he goes on to say, I should keep it up and keep up the good work. And if I ever want to do a shared diagnostic thing like USA/Canada versus Germany over Zoom, he's in. Best to you and your family, from Wolfgang. P.S. The Star Wars figure, which is right here, was from the $1 bin somehow sneaked in there. Okay, that's funny. All right, let's take a look at what Wolfgang has sent over. All right, well, so we have a Disney/Hasbro action figure here that is from The Force Awakens. Oh, but we have the Sad Onion. And yes, of course, I watch Stuart Ashen's channel. So there's the Sad Onion, 0 to 3. All right, next up, Wolfgang has sent a book called The Soul of a New Machine by Tracy Kidder, in English, luckily, because I can read the odd German word, but there's no way I could read an entire book. Winner of the Pulitzer Prize. All right, cool. Okay. Here is what looks like a postcard for the iPod Shuffle. All right, what is next here? So there are some stickers here for some Commodore 64 looking thing there, Petsky. Ooh, he sent a little bit of candy here. That's awesome. Let's see here. What's this? TTL something, some kind of a kit. Ooh, look at this. There it is. A C64 Mini. This is the original one that has the keyboard that obviously doesn't work. They have the Maxi version now, but this is really cool. I don't have one of these. I don't have any of these. So that is quite exciting. He said it didn't work, right? But maybe it just needs some new firmware. There's a little tiny fan included here. Maybe that's for the C64, and a couple little bits of candy here. Let's look at what's inside this little case here that he included. Wow, what is this? It's like a little Game Boy kind of thing, but it's got a SD card slot, battery there, a Wi-Fi module up at the top. And I think what I need to do now is just quickly test out this candy. Not a whole lot, but that's fine. Kinder Country. So it's a little chocolate bar. Let's see what this is all about. And the other one here, while I open this, is the Kinder, which means child, doesn't it? Like kindergarten is, Kinder is for children. Rigol? I don't know, I'm terrible. I gotta say, it's just my pronunciation. Let's see about this. A little chocolate bar here. It's got like nuts and stuff in it. Mmm. Wow. All right, so the country bar here, it tastes like a Rice Krispie square with chocolate on it. So it's almost like marshmallow filling with maybe some kind of puffed rice thing and chocolate. Absolutely freaking delicious. That is good. And how about the Rigol here? All right, so there's another chocolate bar. It's got a little bit of white looking stuff inside. Okay, well that's interesting. Has a similar taste though. The white part, like maybe the marshmallow, is not that different than this one. But I like the little crispy bits in this. This tastes amazing. I love that. This one is a little less good to me. It's not bad, but it's just meh. And then we have another one that's wrapped up. It's like a little bonbon. It says Kinder Sokobon. Sokobon. So it's a little crunchy, like probably a malt ball kind of thing. All right, that wasn't too bad. It was sort of, I don't know, chocolatey, and it was okay. You know, the funny thing is, I'm not a huge fan of milk chocolate. I actually prefer dark chocolate. The milk chocolate's usually just a bit too sweet for me, just for my liking even. Nothing to do with the diabetes. So I generally prefer candy that's just not as super sweet. Obviously Haribo's are pretty sweet, but not always, right? This one here is like another round ball, and I can't quite read the packaging on here, but I imagine this has some kind of liquid inside because I can see a little fill hole there where they filled it. Let's see. Oh yeah, that's not too bad either. I can't even tell you what it is, so I can't tell you where to find it or what it's called, but that was pretty good as well. I gotta say though, the Kinder Country Bar, this thing rocks. Totally rocks. I'm gonna have another bite of it. I probably have chocolate on my teeth. That bar is like, has a buttery taste going on. Wow, delicious. Totally delicious. Yeah. I'll if I see this in a store here, you can find this this brand sometimes in the US. I'm gonna have to buy one of those if I see one because that's really good. Anyhow, okay, let's take a look at this stuff on the bench. I've tried to get the white balance between this camera and this camera adjusted so the bench color looks even. It was always a little warmer from the overhead camera here, which is my Panasonic, than the Sony here. Hopefully it's the same now. So let's take a look at the stuff from Wolfgang. Oh, let's see. So I realize now that these stickers here are keyboard overlays, I guess you could call it. So if you say had a normal keyboard, like this is my bench wireless keyboard, I could stick these onto the keys, and that way when I was using it with a Commodore 64, I wouldn't be guessing at where like the quotation mark is, which is Shift 2. I do happen to know that myself, but say you hadn't used a 64 in a long time, you might have forgotten. So we'll get to the 64, as this is called, the Mini, in a little bit. It's not working. Let's just look at this other stuff first. So here is a Star Wars figurine, The Force Awakens. I don't know anything about these, but those of you in North America, you may be interested to see what the German packaging looks like. Still says Hasbro and Disney, so I don't think it's made by a different company. It's just localized for the German market. Now I've seen The Force Awakens, but I have to admit, I have no idea who this character is, and I don't really know why they would make an action figure. But that's just me. I'm not really a huge fan of the new Star Wars movies. I gotta say, they're not that good. Sorry, I might create a flame war here. I liked Star Wars episodes 4, 5, and 6, especially 4 and 5. Return of the Jedi, not so much. The first 3 movies, yeah, not so great. I did like the movie Rogue One. I thought that was pretty good. It stood on its own pretty well. It didn't feel like it's just a remake of one of the older movies, which is what the other ones feel like. And I also like The Mandalorian, that TV series. I'm enjoying that. But yeah, I'm not really, I don't know much about these characters. We have a book here, and it's The Soul of a New Machine by Tracy Kidder. There's a picture of Tracy here. Now, I have to say, since I've started doing YouTube, I just haven't done a lot of reading. I work a full-time job, and then I try to do the YouTube content as well in my spare time. So that kind of eats up all my spare time. So reading is not something I can do. Perhaps when I get sick, which because of lockdown, I haven't really been going out. I haven't been getting sick. I haven't been catching colds or anything. So maybe in the past when I was sick with a cold, I wouldn't feel like making a video. So I would either watch Netflix, something like that, or read. But like I said, I don't think I've been sick with a cold even since 2019, sometime pre-lockdown. Here's an old postcard for the old iPod Shuffle, the one that looked like a gum stick. It was a pretty cool form factor, I gotta say. Some German there. And there it is, 99 euros, PC and Mac compatible for your iPod Shuffle. Does anyone have one of these still? Obviously, things like smartphones have rendered the need for iPod-type devices sort of redundant, although maybe for a young child, they don't have a phone yet, or say you want to use your headphones with a headphone jack, and like me, you have a phone like this that doesn't have a headphone jack. I'm fine with using Bluetooth these days. I've gotten used to it, but it was difficult to give up. And my last phone right before this one, which was my OnePlus 6, I only got rid of that very recently. That had a headphone jack still. And here's Wolfgang's card. His name is Wolfgang Kierdorf. You can check out his website right there if you're interested. And this is what's on the back. All right, so in this bag appears to be some type of a kit, like a TTL kit of some kind, one you would assemble yourself. What's this say here? TTL RS-232 converter. I assume this is something that takes a max, is it 232 or 323? I always confuse that. And it will convert from TTL serial, say coming off of something like an ESP8266, Arduino, something like that, to regular RS-232 that you can plug into your computer. Now, these kits were pretty cool back in the day, and I actually bought one of these. Oops, parts are flying everywhere. I bought one of these assembled years ago, and it was because of that. I needed something to hook up something to a computer. But nowadays, you can get these from China, and I have bought several of these things for just $1 or $2 that are fully assembled. The chips are everything is done. It has the 9-pin connector like this and pin headers, and it's super easy. In fact, take a look at this. This is my Commodore 1200 Baud modem, right? But this is a little bit different. I might have showed this on the channel before, but instead of being a modem with a speaker inside, I gutted this, and I actually took out where the phone jacks were, and I put a serial connector. And inside here is actually a little PCB that has one of these. It's like converts from the TTL type serial that the Commodore has and outputs standard RS-232, which would mean I could plug this into the back of any Commodore that has a user port, and I could then connect this to a modem or another computer or, you know, whatever. And it's originally I made this because I have an external Wi-Fi modem that I made that also has RS-232 with one of these. And this just allowed me to hook up my 64 so I could do some Commodore 64 BBSing. But it's a great use of these old modems if you have one kicking around. It's really easy to hollow out the inside here. There's a bunch of components, you just take them off, and there's now space for the little PCB, and I just soldered it directly on to the user port connector. And yep, that's it, Max 232. That's the chip. Even though I have a couple of these I got from China, I'm actually gonna assemble this, might as well, right? I have it, and it's just another one to put in the parts bin for when I need it. There are some nice build instructions here in German, but luckily it's pretty simple to put together, so there'll be no issue with me not even, not reading this, although I could use Google Translate to convert this. It's no point really, because everything is marked on here and it should be pretty simple to put together. So that's very cool. Wolfgang must have had that for a long time. Next we have a little itty bitty fan here, a little Pi fan. I guess it's designed for cooling Raspberry Pis and stuff like that. I personally have never installed a fan on any Raspberry Pi. I guess I never felt the need. Some of them have a little heatsink stuck on there, but I don't overclock them. So there's just no point. But small fans like this, very useful. I still use them in other circumstances, so it'll go in my bin full of fans. And next we have this, which is the ODroid little game console thing. Cute little case. I wonder if this is for a Game Boy or something. Was this the original case for this thing? It says made in China. Doesn't have any branding on it, so I can't tell for sure. This micro USB cable. So yeah, this has a pretty nice feel. The buttons, we've got a LiPo internal battery, speaker, controls with 4 buttons under the screen. It feels nice. It's quite thin. Check that out. Look how thin that is. It feels really light in the hand. Oh, okay, so we have 16 gigabyte micro SD card. Right here is an ESP32 microcontroller, so it includes the Wi-Fi radio and it's a microcontroller all in one. It's the newer version of the ESP8266, and these things are very powerful. I mean, for what it is, it costs a few dollars, and they're incredibly powerful. So almost certainly this is doing everything. It's interfacing to the screen, it's interfacing to the SD card. There's probably some separate charging circuitry on here, but it will be generating the audio right out of the microcontroller. And there is an expansion header of some kind on the top there. Right here it says 10th anniversary ODroid. So I think there's been a whole series of ODroid devices, and I personally actually haven't had a single ODroid device ever, but this is the ODroid-Go, I suppose. Looks like it says Rev 0.1, and there's an email address, but I can't really read it through the frosted plastic. I thought there was a scratch on the screen here, but actually it's not a scratch, it's that the plastic hasn't been peeled up. Let me try to get the plastic peeled up. I'd really appreciate it if they put pull tabs. Oh, look at that, yeah. Now it left some kind of sticky residue in the corners where I tried to peel it up. I just went to my tape dispenser and I'm out of tape. So I'll just try to use this tape to peel up some of this sticky residue. Look at that, it does a pretty good job actually. Okay, all right, for now that's good enough. Let's see if this turns on. Oh, it does. Look at this. So it's not nearly as powerful as something like Raspberry Pi. So some of these devices, like I have a little Game Boy looking case that has a Raspberry Pi inside, I think a Pi Zero. It's quite a bit more powerful than this. So this really can only emulate Nintendo, Game Boy Advance, Sega Master System, and Game Gear. Sega Master System and Game Gear are basically the same. So let's just give one of these a try. It's actually, okay. Okay, so to get the screen to look good in the camera, I have to tilt it away that I can't really see the screen. It's off-angle viewing is not particularly great, but to get the glare right, I have to hold it just like this. Unfortunately, the scrolling is pretty bad. I mean, Nintendo games are pretty easy to emulate, and yet the scrolling is kind of herky-jerky on this. I can't really see what I'm doing, so I'm just moving it back and forth. It's not great. This is Mega Man, and yeah, it's not particularly great. The scrolling again, not super smooth. I guess the microcontroller, just the way it interfaces to the LCD is not that fast, so the update rate kind of lags behind, and that makes it not particularly enjoyable. Maybe there are games for this that aren't emulation, they're native games, and they're a bit better, but while I applaud this as a kind of a neat thing to try to do with a microcontroller, the reality is the Raspberry Pi Zero has zero problems, pun intended, emulating these games, and it looks fantastic doing it. You know, it can output directly to an LCD using DPI, and it's 60 frames per second, really smooth, etc., etc. So yes, the ODroid. I love the form factor. I don't know what's the deal with this flashing LED other than maybe that means the battery is low, is probably what that means. I love that form factor, and I think, is this open source, this device? If it is, that's extra cool, and maybe there's some better stuff I can run on this, but the emulation, there are better choices out there, so can't really recommend buying this. Unless you have a specific use case for this device, I really recommend you stick to something that's a bit more powerful so it can emulate these games at 60 frames per second, smooth animation, etc., etc. I had a chance to check out the ODroid-Go here, and it looks like it's only 32 bucks. And reading about it, I think the emulation capabilities of it are really an afterthought. The real idea of this thing, and if I scroll down here, so it's a kit you have to assemble yourself, which is cool because it kind of teaches you some building skill. But I think the cool thing is you can code and program it directly from the Arduino IDE. Here it is running a Hello World type program. And it looks like actually that blue LED, which I complained about, is controllable from the microcontroller itself. So there it's pulsing, I guess, with some software. And there are lots of tutorials on reading the buttons and checking the battery voltage, generating sound, and loading an open source looking Tetris game as well. And because this thing's a regular microcontroller, that pin header can be used for things like LCDs and weather radios and all sorts of other stuff. Look at this, measuring distance with an ultrasonic sensor. Actually, it's kind of cool because it's battery powered, which is not something that you typically have with an ESP8266 or 32. So it's kind of a handy little quick and dirty microcontroller setup thing. So yeah, I sound a little bit harsh when I was looking at it in person, but now that I see what this thing is really all about, it's kind of cool actually. It's only $32. It's not super expensive. And I definitely recommend, if you're going to get one of these, don't bother with the emulation stuff. It doesn't really work well. Just play around with learning how to code your own games with the Arduino IDE and fool around with the fact that it's a pretty powerful and cool microcontroller with built-in Wi-Fi capabilities. And yes, here is the 64 Mini. Little tiny Commodore 64 non-functional keyboard. If you're into Commodores, you will have already seen everything there is to know about this thing. There's a Mini, which is this one, and a Maxi, which is a full-size with a working keyboard. But it's a modern emulation inside, so it's not an original C64 in any way. So therefore it has HDMI, it's powered by micro USB, and on the side for the controllers, it's got 2 USB ports, and there's the power button. I haven't seen the full-size one or this one, to be honest, neither of these in person. So I don't really know if the port configuration on the full-size one is different. But yeah, I know that the keyboard doesn't work on this, but there's been a recent project, and in Parafractic over on Retro Recipes, he did a video where he made a working keyboard for this thing, even reusing these keycaps. Just incredible. 3D printed and a PCB and super cool. But yeah, right now it doesn't work. You have to plug a USB keyboard on the side, and then you use these stickers to help you know what buttons to push. So Wolfgang had said that this thing does not work. So if I plug in the power there and I push the power button, which is a clicky, momentary switch, no power light comes on at all. Let's plug HDMI in there and let's plug power back in. Okay, I've switched the monitor over to HDMI, and if I push the power button, we get nothing, no signal. So the thing appears to be dead. Now I take the screws out of the bottom, so they're under the 4 rubber feet. And if I pop this apart, it comes apart pretty easily. There it is. So this little PCB has some kind of an ARM processor. It's probably runs some OS like Linux or something. Look at these metal bars here for weight. The whole thing is relatively light, but I guess without these bars, it would be so light, it would just feel super cheap. The power LED is connected to the PCB here. What I don't know is the power LED soft controlled, like by the microcontroller or by the ARM processor. Does this thing have to boot up for the power LED to come on, or is that just connected directly to power? So what's the fault on this thing? That it's getting no power entirely, or is it something else, like it's corrupted, bricked, as they say? Inside, there is nothing unexpected. We have an all-winner dual-core processor. We have some kind of flash memory. This is like the storage of the operating system and ROMs and whatever other things. And we have an SD-RAM chip right here. It looks like it has space for another one, so you have twice as much RAM. There are a couple recovery buttons here, recovery and U-boot. Looks like something over here. This is probably like a USB hub chip or something like that. Or it could be HDMI transmitter, I don't know. I'm not sure what's built into this chip or the processor or not. On the back where the power LED connected, I think was right here, there's also a header here for the U-boot button. So the U-boot would allow you to upload new firmware into this thing, probably over serial, without needing to boot the OS. So this is probably for development purposes. They left this connector here. Okay, so the first thing I need to do is figure out if the power button on the side here is actually working. So let's just hook that up to my multimeter. So I have it on continuity, beep, beep. And if I touch these two pins here, I push the button. Yep, that's working, no problem. So it's fine, because obviously if that button were bad, that would keep it from booting. All right, next up, let's hook this up here to power. I'm noticing right here, there's a little header, which is probably a serial port. And usually you can find voltage on this. So this pin here looks like ground, and this one here looks like voltage, and yep, 3.33 volts. I didn't even push the power button, and it's working. So clearly this thing actually powers up all the time. Pushing power doesn't do anything at all. So with a 4-pin header like this, there's going to be 3.3 volts, there's going to be ground, and there's going to be transmit and receive. That's pretty much all you ever got when you talk about a UART hooked up to one of these processors. Now, what you're going to do is we need to figure out which pins are transmit and which are receive. So really, we just need to look for the transmit pin, which is the signal coming out of this board that would go into a serial device, and the receive is going to be the other pin. So I'm going to grab my multimeter probe, and I'm going to connect it up to a ground, like right here. I'm going to stick the probe into one of the two pins that are the transmit or receive. I'm not sure which is which. I know this one is 3.3 volts. I know that's ground because I just probed them. So I'm going to stick it into this one right here. Just leave it in there just like that. And I'm going to do single shot on the scope, and I have it set to trigger off of a downward slope. So you control the triggering modes here, and downward is what I want, because when I power this thing up, it's going to go to 3 volts, 3.3 volts on this serial line. Both of them are going to go to that. And the transmit line is going to start dropping to 0 volts as it transmits. So I want this to freeze once it detects downward slope. And I'm going to connect the power up to this thing. And there it is. Look at that. So it's absolutely transmitting. I went handheld because I don't have the scope in a position that is conducive to filming. But that is absolutely serial data. So that is the serial line transmit that I'm going to hook up to a little USB UART so I can read what this says. But we have to figure out what the baud rate is. So I'm going to use the cursors. They're already turned on here. And I just need to try to figure out, oh, wait, look at that. It was already perfectly set. So we're going to need to figure out the delta of one of these high or low, you know, whatever. You look for basically the smallest interval. So see, that interval matches that interval, and that intervals are all the same. So we're going to look at that one right there. And right here it shows 8.64 US, but look at this right there, 115 kilohertz. That right there is the baud rate that this thing is operating at. It's really convenient how the Rigol scope calculates that for you. So you just move the cursors to one of the peaks or the valleys, and to the smallest one you can find, and that will tell you the baud rate. I'll put a link to a good article on how to do this as well. So if what I just explained doesn't make sense, read this article and then it will tell you exactly how you calculate the baud rate off of an oscilloscope capture. So I have a little UART device right here that I use for programming microcontrollers and all sorts of stuff. It's just one I got from China very cheaply. It supports 3.3 volts and 5 volts, which is what I like about it. And it runs, doesn't use an FTDI chip, I don't think. So I don't have to worry about counterfeit chip drivers, which these are all counterfeit. I think this is like a CHS driver, something like that. Oh no, it says FTDI right on the back here. So I don't know. Anyways, yeah, just beware of the counterfeit FTDIs. They're kind of hard to use. Anyhow, you get one that has 3.3 volts and 5 volts, which this does. I have here on the end just some pins connected. That means I don't have to solder anything into here. I can just stick that in there. I have definitely set it for 3.3 volts because these are always 3.3, but we also measured it with the multimeter, so we know that that's 3.3. What I need to connect is the ground, the transmit, and the receive. So the transmit from this, which is the pin we just figured out was transmit, needs to go to the RX pin on this board. And the TX pin here needs to go to RX there. And you just line it up so it's in the correct order. And what I'm going to do is pull the power out of this. So I'm going to take this connected pin header, and I'm going to put it in there, just like that. And I'm going to kind of keep it taut enough that it's pushing to the side, so it's making contact. And on the computer here, let's see, so COM12, oh, 115, COM12 is what the little UART device is, so we're gonna hit open, and I am just gonna carefully connect this power up right here like this. There it is. Oh dear. So it says, hello, boot 0 is starting, boot 0 version 3 Initializing SDRAM fail. That's not a good sign. I'm assuming that the SDRAM is bad on this little device. That sucks. The SDRAM, which is this chip right here, it's BGA. There's no way that I have enough skill to resolder that or take that off and put a different one on. If I try to do anything there, that will completely destroy those solder balls that are underneath there. And there's no way this thing will work again. I assume a skilled person could just swap that chip, maybe reflow, maybe one of the balls is bad, who knows. But yeah, that's not good. I'm gonna do a little bit of research quickly just to make sure that this isn't a firmware problem, that maybe I could reflash the firmware on here to fix the RAM problem, but I don't think so. I think that message at boot there is pretty straightforward, that the SDRAM has gone bad or something in the processor maybe has gone bad. Well, and I think this thing is dead. I did get it hooked up to my Windows PC in fel mode. Seems like there's some aftermarket firmware. You get to that mode by holding down the U-boot. While you plug this in, it shows up as a USB device on Windows, and theoretically you can load some new firmware on there. If the original firmware were released for this, I could probably try to reflash this. I honestly feel like it's dead. I found one other person talking about this SDRAM failure on theirs, and the reply was, oh, sounds like your hardware is bad. So I guess that's what's going on here as well. I'll reassemble this machine right now, and I suppose I just have a very cool miniature 64 model that I could put on the shelf. Too bad it's not actually usable. If anyone has any clues as to what might be the problem here, if anyone is familiar with this thing intimately and knows that error, like could that error, that SDRAM error, be caused by corrupted firmware? I personally don't really think so, but anything is possible, I suppose. But if it's caused by that and then someone has instructions they can point me to reflash the entire NAND with like the original firmware, please send me an email. I really appreciate it. I'd like to get this thing working. Otherwise, for now, this thing will just be a little bit of a paperweight. And there it is, one miniature Commodore 64 paperweight. So thank you, Wolfgang, for sending in this cool little assortment of stuff. All right, we have a package here, and it says Chewy on the side. And this was under the Christmas tree in one of my mail call videos, and I think someone thought that I had a pet, and this was something that I had ordered. It says Chewy.com, where pets love to shop. I have to say I'm unfamiliar with Chewy. I don't have any dogs or cats or pets right now. I haven't had any pets in quite a number of years, actually, and it's not because I don't love pets. I totally love dogs and cats. It's just that it takes a little bit of extra effort to keep your house clean and all that stuff, and I travel a lot, so having pets is just extra amount of work. Anyhow, this package was sent in by viewer Chris from Seattle, Washington. Hi to all my viewers in Washington, which is literally just a 10-minute drive from where I live, Washington State. Seattle is about 3 hours or 3.5 hours north of Portland if you take Interstate 5 directly north. But yes, let's crack this open and see what's in here. I don't think it's going to be dog toys or cat toys. I think this is going to be something of the retro variety, probably. All right. We have a note printed on a dot matrix printer. All right, so this is pretty funny. This appears to be another Macintosh LC. And he wrote on the, and he put a note on the top here, and he says, it's cleaner on the inside, 100% spider free. Because yes, I have sort of mentioned how I have gotten some computers lately that have bugs in them. So yeah, that's funny. Another Mac LC. Let's just quickly crack this open, see what we find inside. Come on, don't give me a hard time. There it is. All right, so inside this machine here, we have a hard drive, the floppy, and there is here, it says Micro Mac Technology Thunder Cache. So it's probably either, to be honest, this is probably an accelerator card. Looks like this has a 25 megahertz 68030 and a Mathco processor. Let's take a look at the note that Chris sent. It's rather lengthy, so I'll just sort of read the important bits. He says, enclosed is a collection of questionable capacitors, helpfully enclosed in a case that is arguably the worst Macintosh ever made, the LC. And that wasn't me saying that. I kind of I can't disagree with that. This is such a compromised machine. It is really bad. Featuring the 32-bit 68020 crippled by a 16-bit data bus. It also had shared video RAM, that's with the CPU and the video hardware shared the RAM, which slowed it down as well, that enabled only 512 by 384 by 256 color, aka a screen size that at launch almost no software supported. And that's because the early Mac color Macs were all 640 by 480. So when Apple decided to release this with this reduced resolution, which incidentally is the same resolution that's on the Mac Classic, Color Classic, nothing worked with it. Nothing at all. So you basically could run almost nothing on this thing. Later, compatibility did come, because they sold a lot of these. The processor direct slot did allow emulation of the Apple II with a special Apple II card. The PDS slot in this LC, though, is filled, and he'll leave it for me to discover while I've already looked. It's a 68030 accelerator. It's pretty cool and rare, apparently, I suppose. I'm not sure how much faster this would make this computer, though, because this is still hamstrung by the same 32-bit to 16-bit bottleneck that the main processor on this board is. So it's just very silly. Chris goes on to say he really loves my channel, and unlike others, you clearly still retain a love and passion for vintage hardware that is really energizing to see, and your technical repair and diagnostic ability is some of the best online. I also really appreciate that you are not afraid to admit when you don't know something, such as the exact place of the 2CI in the Mac, or 2SI, I'm sorry, in the Mac lineup, although your guesses are actually right on with my recollection. I had a 2CX, so I was very attuned to what was happening in that 2CI, 2SI time period, and I felt I had a better computer since it didn't rely on onboard video. That's true, although the onboard video on the 2CI is very fast, and I think it's faster than the new bus video because if you put the RAM in the right configuration, it actually was running at a much faster speed than new bus. And new bus was kind of a slow bus standard. I did all this reading kind of, I think, after that 2SI video. But I have found that with my 040 accelerator in my 2SI, or 2CI, I'm sorry, I keep mixing it up. The 2CI with a 68040, the video speed is really, really fast because it just has a really fast connection to the processor. And with the right memory in there, the first 4 memory sticks are basically dedicated for use of the video hardware, and the second 4 are used for the processor. So anyways. He does, I'll just paraphrase here. He says he'd love to see me do a video on applesauce hardware. It sounds like a disk imaging thing for different types of disk. I'm not familiar with it, so he puts a URL. I'll have to check that out. And he printed this letter on a mini scribe printer, I think, on his Apple II. So it says he's near the end of his page, so he'll sign off. Thank you very much. He says, P.S. It looks like one of the caps has leaked on here. Well, I can tell you that it looks like more than one has leaked, actually. And it can be really hard to tell with these because sometimes it just looks a little weird around them. But when you pull the caps off, the evidence of the leaking is much more apparent. So anyhow, we'll take a look at that when I pull those caps off. So let's take a look at this on the bench. So the Macintosh LC computer. What's interesting about the LC versus the later ones is it originally had support for dual internal disk drives. Did Apple really sell it with 2 floppy drives and no internal hard drive? Because you either have a disk drive here or an internal hard drive. Who would have gone with that particular configuration? I just have to wonder. Now notice right off the bat, there is no floppy drive in here. There's the screws though for mounting it. So this would use the normal 1.44 meg drive as in all the other machines like the Classic and whatever, all the SE high density and everything onward. So I do have disk drives that will work in here. And the original 40 meg hard drive, this mounting mechanism is really chintzy. You gotta like bend these clips out of the way. Oh, come on. There we go. And there it is, the 40 meg Connor hard drive. Apple branded, but it probably has an Apple ROM chip on there too. They were notorious for doing that. In fact, when you tried to run the Apple hard drive setup utility, unless you had a hard drive that had their ROM in it, like this is a regular standard Connor hard drive, and Quantum and other types were definitely used by Apple. If it didn't have their ROM, the program wouldn't recognize it. The program to format these hard drives, there was a patch you could apply using ResEdit though, that would make it ignore that particular characteristic and it would format any hard drive. So it was literally Apple doing ridiculousness even back then that just were so consumer unfriendly. So there is the accelerator card. So Chris had mentioned this is in here. So it's a 68030, 25 megahertz, a full one, not an EC, and a Mathco processor. Now I think just like in the Classic 2, Apple crippled this machine and they connected the processor to the peripherals with 16 bits, just like the older 68,000 machines. Cost-cutting measure probably, but it did result in definite performance decrease for the processor. So this processor here is also 32 bits, data bus, but it will have that same limitation as the built-in one. So there's probably some type of improvement from this, but it's not going to be dramatic. What I don't really get about this accelerator card, which is called the Micromac technology, I don't know, no check marks here, is it has provision for either RAM or cache memory. It's probably cache memory, which would dramatically speed up the processor, but it's not installed. There is no crystal oscillator installed on this board here. It does say MC clock times 2. I don't know what that means. I'm not sure if this thing really runs it at 25 megahertz. This is actually a 16 megahertz part here, the Mathco processor. So it's quite possible that this just is running at 16 megahertz. So I'm not actually sure how much faster the 030 is over the 020 at the same clock speed. If anyone has any experience with that, put a comment in the comment section. So this motherboard has the original Varta battery on it, which I'm going to pop out right now. Hasn't leaked. So I'm going to put this in e-waste. This right here is the connection for that second floppy drive if you're going to have it here. How silly is that? Clearly this thing needs recaps, a good amount of caps there. Definitely a lot of crust in here though, especially right there. What is that? Take a look at this. It's just, guess it's just black dust? Or is this from a bug or something? Definitely, I'll have to look at a little something. So this thing really needs a good wash. Now this little power supply, which I just popped out, this is the same one that's in that other LC2 or LC3 that I looked at. This one's made by Aztec though. The other one was made by TDK. I think they're all pretty much prone to leakage. I don't see any evidence of leakage on the bottom here like I did on the other one. So that's actually a good thing. There's more bug leftovers in there. Let me plug this into mains and give this a little power up, see if I hear it running. I hear it clicking. So it's just like the other one. Click, 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 click. Let me just plug it into a load here and turn this on, see what happens. Oh, you know what? It's actually running the computer right now. So that's a good sign, actually. Okay, so I just hooked up my monitor and the power supply, turned it on, and I heard a startup sound. And look, we have an image. This thing is working. That's awesome. Okay, I'm going to turn this off because it clearly needs a recap. But the fact is, we have an image which is way better than the Performa LC 460 motherboard, whatever, in the other LC I have. So that's very exciting. This thing shows signs of life. Clearly needs some TLC, good wash, obviously. Recapping of the motherboard. And I will be inspecting the Aztec power supply here, looking for any leaky caps, changing out any in there that are leaking. Well, to be honest, if I find any that are leaking in here, I'll just change them all. And yeah, oh, let's see if this hard drive is working. Let me move the computer out of the way. I'm gonna use my little hard drive power supply here. Let's see if this thing spins and sounds normal or self-destructs like all the other hard drives on my channel lately. Okay, all right, here we go. Hey, thumbs up. That sounds completely normal. Kind of typical noisy old school hard drive sound, but excellent. It's a 40 meg hard drive, so capacity is rather limited on this old drive, but that's pretty sweet that that does work. So thank you very much, Chris, for sending in this LC that basically is working. Just needs a little TLC, and this thing should work for many more years to come. I really appreciate it. Oh, and actually, before I forget, here is Chris's letter, which he typed out on his Apple IIe using Multiscribe. So that's kind of neat. I gotta say, what kind of printer was this? Was this just a dot matrix? I guess it was a dot matrix. The ink bleeds a little bit, so it's not as defined as I'm used to. but it could be that he had it in the high quality mode for printing the letter, you know, letter quality. So yes, again, Chris, thank you very much. Well, that's going to be it for this video. Definitely bummed out that I couldn't get this 64 Mini working. Seems like lately I've been getting stuff on mail call that I get stumped with and I can't fix, but at least the LC fired right up, even with bad capacitors, it actually worked. So that was kind of exciting. Anyhow, if you like this video, well, you know what to do, and if you didn't, you know what to do, all the regular YouTube stuff. And that's going to be it. Thanks very much for watching. Thanks to all my viewers for sending in this mail call stuff, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye.